Okay, you guys, it's 5:30. We should probably we only have 10 in here. Okay. Well, what we lack in numbers, we are gaining in enthusiasm. I'm sure. I'm sure that's the case. Let me ask you a question while we wait to see if there's any people coming in. Have you guys noticed yourselves looking up at trees a little bit more since the class started? Are you engaging with the world up above you now more than you were before? I'm hoping that's the case.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, that's good to hear. It was transformational for me, but I don't expect everybody to love trees that much, but I do know that you appreciate them when you have to get to know them a little better. Okay, so I'm going to just charge ahead. I have a feeling that we're going to get some more folks, and I'll just have to keep pressing the buttons. Okay, so this list would be our second field trip. Usually what we do is we meet at the corner of Sunflower and Bristol, and we've already called the security so they know we're going to be there, so we don't get tackled as we're walking around. Couple things though, just to keep in mind. If you do have time and you do feel like it, maybe it'll be during your holiday shopping. I don't know if anybody goes to malls anymore, but I usually go to at least once or twice just to make my wife happy. So, but if you do go, you should try to do a couple of things. First of all, you should go to South Coast Village, which is across Sunflower from South Coast Plaza. So where Maggiano's used to be, it's kind of across where Maggiano still is. It's across the road there. The Regency theaters are there. And then there's a little area where I'm trying to think of what other places are there in that little shopping center. But anyway, you're going to find the Heath Melaleuca. You're going to find the Tomlinson Ash. You're going to find the Cape Chestnut, all in that area there in the periphery around in the parking lot. And you're going to see the nicest examples of Heath Melaleuca that you will probably ever see in your life. They're in the middle of the parking lot. They're in their own little planters, and they've reached their maximum girth and height, and they're still only about 12 feet tall. And they're just gorgeous, stocky trees. So I would, and seeing the Tomlinson Ash in person is a good thing too. I think on my drive-by list, I have it. There's a Leeward Street in Dover Shores that has them along there, but it's worth seeing them over there in that area. Also, bless you. Also, you should go over and take a walk through Noguchi Gardens. That's where we usually take we take a lot of traditional pictures as a class, but our first one is there in Noguchi Gardens, and you can see the Coast Redwoods here that are looking very happy in this picture. These trees are very well cared for within this garden, which is basically a living sculpture. And there's probably about 8 or 9 trees on your trees list that are in Noguchi Garden. Not that you're going to go in there with your clippers because you'll get arrested, but it would be worth your while to go look around in there just to see it's the story of water, and it's a very interesting concept. And our class did a miniature version of this for the Spring Garden Show in 2016, I think it was, or something like that. Anyway, so we took a lot of inspiration from this garden. So we usually take a picture there. Going to South Coast Village and going to the Noguchi Garden would be a worthwhile thing. Maybe just walk across the bridge, and there's a lot of trees on our list there. At the base of that bridge that crosses Bristol, on the shopping center side, there's a Earthrhina christogalli, the cockspur coral. So it's worth taking a trip over there if you feel like it. What used to happen when I was a student, well, after I was a student, the security is pretty stiff there. And so we have to get clearance a couple months in advance to take a class through. But my predecessor used to get so tired of the security coming and bothering us as a class that he made this a self-guided tour. The students had to just go do it themselves because he got too upset with the security guards. But it doesn't bother me. We just call ahead and we're okay. Plus, Joe does the landscape for Anton Segerstrom, who owns that place. So it's pretty cool. We have a good connection there. So anyway, take a trip over there. All right, so here we go. Earthrhina humiana. This is the natal coral tree. Now, I'm going to, with these slides and when I show you the specimens themselves, I'm going to just spend most of my time focusing on the attributes that set it apart. Okay, so that's important to remember. So Earthrhina humiana is typically a deciduous tree in its native South Africa, but it can be almost evergreen year round. So usually around this time it's starting to drop most of its leaves. Things I would want you to know about this one that's unique to this one. It has, you remember we talked about coralloides, Earthrhina coralloides looking like it had a really squatty inflorescence where somebody had pressed it down and made it fat and squatty. This is the exact opposite. It's like it's been stretched out. And also the stems that hold the flowers go out beyond the outer shell of the tree. And so you have kind of a natural shell or outer edges of the canopy of the tree. And then you see these stems coming up above that have the flowers at the end of them. So they make an extra effort to hold their flowers out beyond the canopy of the tree. Okay. So the flower inflorescence is stretched out and long, plus the stem that it's on is long and sticks out beyond the edge of the tree. Okay. Whoops. So you can see a little bit of that here when you look out on the edges, especially look at this periphery over here. But that's kind of what we're looking for. Now, this is a multi-trunk tree. It does branch from the base like many coral trees do. And it's not that big of a tree. It gets 30 feet tall and about the same width. So now here you can see this. Here's the branch, and then here's there's some leaves on here, but you can see how the flower is kind of almost snaky. It's like it's been pulled out, and so it's much more stretched out. So here is the leaf. Again, all Earthrhina have compound leaves, and they have 3 leaflets in a leaf. This leaf is shinier and seems to have a little bit more of a point to the spade shape. You know, we said these leaves are typically spade shaped. Well, this one seems to have a little bit more of a point. What I've done deliberately for the sake of comparison is I put the Earthrhina humiana leaf against the Earthrhina humiana trunk. And then down below, you can see Earthrhina coralloides leaf next to Erythrinocoralloides trunk to give you that comparison. So remember that golden trunk that's on the naked coral tree? Well, this one's more of a silvery gray color. And the leaf itself, instead of being that dull green, has a little bit more of a sheen to it, okay? A little more shiny. So here are the two leaves next to each other. And so what I'm trying to do is drive home the point, even though these differences are not huge, they're enough that you should be able to notice. So this is Erythrinocoralloides right here, and this is Erythrinohumiana. They both have spurs on the petials, little hooks, little spurs. This one, you'll see it probably a little bit more densely on Erythrinocoralloides than this one, but they both have them. But you see how this is more of a dull green, this has a little bit more of a sheen to it, and see how this one has a little bit more pointiness to the leaflets, okay? So those are things to look for. Here's the backside of the leaf. There's a spur, it's a little bit more pronounced. You can find them on this, but they're not nearly as regular and as prolific on Erythrinohumiana, okay? So these are the bottoms of the leaves. So it's briefly deciduous, native to South Africa, may grow 30 feet tall and as wide. Flowers continuously from late summer to late autumn with long red-orange blossoms held way above the leaves, unlike other coral trees. Dark green compound leaf is almost shiny. Okay. I think we're a little out of our order here. So let's do this. We're going to go down to number 117. Okay, sorry to make us out of order, but we're going to just go ahead and follow through. Erythrina christogalli, remember it's hyphenated, the species, is from South America. It gets 10 to 20 feet tall and 10 to 20 feet wide. The common name on this is the cockspur coral tree. The cockspur comes from this kind of appendage here on the flower, this kind of little hook-shaped section that comes out here. This is an inflorescence again, but this flower shape is unique and probably by far the most distinctive feature is this flower shape. The leaf as well is a little bit different. Remember, prior to this, most of the coral trees we've seen have had spade-shaped leaflets. This is not spade-shaped. It's in threes, so the leaflets are three on a leaf, but instead of being spade-shaped, it's more lanceolate shape. It's more of a typical leaf shape, okay? So remember that. Here's the top and here's the bottom of the leaf. Here are the inflorescence with the flowers. This is before they open, and then as they open, they have these little appendages that come out that are hook-shaped. And what that's supposed to resemble, if you've ever been on the farm and seen a rooster, they have a spur on the back of their leg that they use to fight. And they just jump up and then try to gouge their opponent with that spur. And that's where it got its name. The one point that I'd like to make, this is the one that's at the base of the bridge at South Coast Plaza. And you see how this one is more of a kind of an orangey coral color as opposed to the previous one, which is almost a rosy magenta color. So that's another characteristic. The flower is unique in its shape, and the color has a little bit more of a range that we will see from individual to individual. So this is one color. Ours that we have in the horticulture department has this color scheme. The one that is at South Coast Plaza has this color scheme. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So here's that the three leaflets on a leaf, and here is the pod with a undulating pod. You can see the seed where the seeds go inside. We don't usually see pods on coral trees very often, but we do on this coral tree. they hang on a little longer, so we see them. They fall off pretty quickly on some of the other coral trees, and so, but we can see them on this one. Here we go again. Now, another characteristic unique to this tree, as opposed to the last several corals, excuse me, is that the the branches, or excuse me, the bark is really rough on the cockspur coral, really chunky and rough. And we just showed you the Earthrhina humiana, which had a smooth trunk on it. So very distinctive. So this, the things that separate this from the most of corals is the shape of the flower, the color range of the flower, and the chunkiness of the bark. Here's the one at South Coast Plaza. Always seems to get a little bit more haggard every year. Here you can see the bark of this tree, how it's much different, much more deeply furrowed and unique. This is one that's down the street. Let me tell you another thing about this tree. I really like this tree, but it has the tendency after it blooms to hold on to that whole section of blooms. So the stems from the blooms, which can be kind of thick, persist. And then the tree kind of grows around the dieback of those bloom stems. And so it looks kind of rangy, okay? So if you really were interested in keeping this tree looking nice and clean, then you'd have to get up there about once a year and just take out the dead stems, because the stems from the flowers persist on the tree and make it look a little bit shrubbier. And that would be something to keep in mind. It's not a big deal to clean those out, but it takes time. Here's the bark again and the leaf, and look, there's even a little spur on this one. You don't find nearly as, they're nearly as pronounced as on coralloides. Here's the bark again, just showing, you know, it should be kind of a standout bark for sure. This is actually in a picture from, I think it's Brazil. So this is a South American native. And I think this picture was taken in Brazil, if my memory serves. So where it's from naturally. Okay, nearly evergreen, especially in Hawaii. It doesn't really lose its leaves. Native to South Africa. Did I say South Africa? I think that's wrong, you guys. I think that's wrong. Hang on. I think this is a South American native. That's what I meant to say. I'm just going to double check. Just hang on. There's a really good, while I've got you here and you all have your pencils, there's a really good reference website called SelecTree, SELEC, capital TREE. That's where I usually go to look up things.
Could you repeat that 1 second?
Say that again.
Could you repeat that again?
It's SelecTree, SELECTREE. Native to Argentina, Uruguay, and southern Brazil. So this is wrong here. I think I said South Africa. It's not South Africa, it's South America. Okay, I knew I was not going crazy. I just typed in the wrong thing. Okay, so unique spike-like clusters of velvety bird-like blossoms from warm pink to wine red. Depending upon the environment, there are many as 3 distinct bloom periods. So at school, just so you know, today I spent 2 hours hunting down these specimens because most of them were South Coast Plaza and other areas. And so I came back walked right by the tree at the base of the bridge. And I thought, well, we've got this gorgeous one on the department. Went back, not one blossom on it. For the first time I've looked at it in months, not one blossom on it. So I was surprised to see that. So 3 distinct blooming periods, prune back old flower spikes to keep tree clean and ensure constant blooming. Okay, now we're going back to 106 on our list. This is Gladitsia triacanthos sunburst. Now, this is just like Gladitsia triacanthos inermis. This is a thornless locust tree. And the variety sunburst is very popular because of the way the new leaves look when they're first coming out. They're a golden yellow green color, and then they have a pretty pronounced fall color as well, again with the golden color. The problem is in California, with the lack of cold weather and our perpetual droughty conditions, we don't get the same drama. So if you were if you had this in Central and Eastern North America, you would be in awe of the new growth when it leaves out in the fall color in the fall, but it's not quite as intense here. It's happening now at South Coast Plaza, and that's why we have this on our list, is because it works in beautifully with our walk around there. This is a tree that's been there for a long, long time. It's on the same, I think it's Anton Street. It's the same street that the Performing Arts Center is on, and they're lining on both sides. Okay. Again, similar things. You've got a compound leaf. You've got a trunk that has bark that peels longitudinally up and down the trunk. In big long sections, it kind of peels, opens up lengthwise, which is very rare. We don't see that kind of a pattern on trees. And then you remember it had those lenticels as well. So here are some younger ones at South Coast Plaza. I was there today picking up some leaves and some pods. Here are the flowers. And here's the new growth coming out with that golden green color. Pretty spectacular when it first leaves out. Native to Central and Eastern North America, grows quickly from 30 to 70 feet tall. Distinctive bright golden yellow new foliage ages to yellow-green color. It foliates easily in response to temperature changes or drought. So if you're not irrigating this tree, it's gonna show that unhappiness. And you can see it at South Coast Plaza where it's in with a lawn. It's looking still happy. When it's in a planter, it's already dropped most of its leaves. So it's you can see that happening. Okay, next on our list is Magnolia grandiflora. This is from the southeastern United States. It's a southern magnolia. One of the most glorious of the street trees. Magnolia grandiflora has these huge 10-inch wide flowers that are quite fragrant. They also have kind of these leathery leaves. They look a little bit ficus-like, but instead of being rubbery, they're more kind of crispy. You know, in other words, if you were to snap them, they would snap instead of bend. They have a little fuzz on the underside of the leaves as well. But really pretty flowers for sure, and not covering the tree, but it's kind of dappled on the tree. Here's the top of the leaf, and there's the bark. It's kind of gray and crackly, and the underneath, the wood underneath is kind of a cinnamon color, and this is gray. We see that combination a lot, but I describe it as a crackly bark. Here's the top of the leaf. Here's the bottom, a little bit of rusty fuzz on the underside of the leaf. Here's the bark again. Now, what we're seeing here is something called a scar, S-C-A-R. And if you've lived around a magnolia, you've probably seen these things. These are we think of these as being the transition between the cone and the flowering tree. So Magnoliaceae has some of the oldest species of trees that go back to the coniferous times. And so they're one of the first of the flowering plants. And so these scars are thought to be kind of reminiscent of the cones in the way that they're woody and they hold the seeds. But instead of holding the seeds kind of tucked inside, they're kind of pushing the seeds out. They're bright red and sticky. And these scars go through a whole, change as time goes on. It takes a while for them to develop. So when they're young, they're kind of soft and fuzzy. And then they start to mature a little bit, and then the little seeds come out and then fall off, and then that woody scar hangs on the tree for a while, and then eventually will fall off. And it's another one of those things. I remember talking to my neighbor about getting a good tree, and I suggested this, and she apparently grew up someplace where this one was around and she stepped on a few of these. And so that was in her memory more than anything else. So it's not quite like the liquid amber fruits that are kind of small, like giant marbles. These are large. So if you're stepping on one, it means you're not watching. So, but I didn't tell her that. Anyway, this was a picture. I snapped this picture at Mount Vernon because this is an old magnolia that's there opposite George Washington's greenhouse that he had built. Also, the $20 bill, if you happen to have one, has the one that's on the left-hand side of the portico there was planted by Andrew Jackson. And it was planted from a cutting taken from a tree of his in Tennessee. And then they grew it, kind of babied it for a while, and then put it in the ground towards the end of into his second term as president. He planted it for his wife, and his wife died while he was in office. And she underwent a lot of criticism. There's a whole story about how they think that she died of just the intensity of the pressure of what they were saying about her. So his wife, Rachel's one of her favorite trees. So he planted this. It's I think in 2017, they were talking about taking this tree down. A plane flew into it about 10 years ago. I don't know if you remember, a private plane flew into the White House yard and it hit this tree, and then it had some other things that were going wrong with it. But one of the cool things that I think is that this started a tradition of presidents planting trees. And so this first tree became a tradition. I'm just reading a little bit here. Became a tradition followed by later presidents of adding features to the White House grounds. Teddy Roosevelt added an American elm. Jimmy Carter added an herb garden, cedar of Lebanon, as well as a tree house built without nails to protect the Atlas cedar in which it was built. George H.W. Bush added 3 trees, which included redbud, purple beech, and a little leaf linden, planted with Queen Elizabeth II in 1991. George W. Bush added a silver maple, and most recently, Michelle Obama added a kitchen garden. The White House magnolia was favorite tree for Harry Truman. And it also, from what I understand, a favorite of Jackie Kennedy, who added her own garden to the grounds, while her husband, President John F. Kennedy, added a saucer magnolia. Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill are said to have sat under Andrew Jackson's magnolia to have conversations. Okay, so anyways, take out a $20 bill, look at it, and there you go. Andrew Jackson's right here, planted for his wife. So it's a pretty tall tree, 80 feet tall, 60 feet wide, most commonly. Native to the southern United States, evergreen tree, goes 80 feet tall, 60 feet wide, powerfully fragrant 8 to 10 inch white blossoms, blooms summer through fall. Distinctive scar is a cone-like structure that bears red sticky seeds. Leaves bronzy green, leathery, glossy on top with a slight brown fuzz underneath. Many great varieties worth researching. My favorite one is one called Little Gem, Magnolia Little Gem. It gets about 15 feet tall and maybe about 10 feet wide, and it has the same size flowers, just a tighter growing, smaller tree. It's a very cool little tree. Okay. Melaleuca ericifolia, the heath melaleuca, from Southeast Australia, can get up to 18 feet tall. These are the ones that are at South Coast Village. And you can see they have this very puffy look to them, a very shreddy bark. Each of them have their own 6 foot by 6 foot planter that they're in. The leaves are very thin. This tree gets confused with another similar melaleuca. The blossoms on this are almost bright white, little bit creamy white, but mostly a bright white. Usually around June that we see these. And here's the leaf, the little needle-like leaves next to the bark. So these are both in South Coast Village, and then across to where the Regency Theater is, that one theater that shows kind of those movies that, you know, are less popular. Here you can see them in their planters growing happily. They were planted in the 60s. So they've been there for, you know, 60 years, and they're doing just fine there. Southeastern Australia, the shrub, the tree gets up 30 feet tall and wide. You know, most of the places, when you look them up, they say 12 to 18 feet tall. I think that most of those trees in South Coast Plaza, which are 60 years old, probably being stunted a little bit by those planters. But there's kind of a squatty tree. Paler, whitish, brownish, papery, thick bark. Leaves are arranged alternately, sometimes in whorls of 3, dark green, linear in shape, 1/4 inch to 3/4 inch long. Flowers are creamy white in color, arranged in heads or spikes on the ends of branches, which continue to grow after flowering, like many melaleucas and callistemon do. You know, they bloom, and then the branch continues to grow with leaves beyond the bloom. Okay, the next one on our list is Fraxinus UDI Tomlinson. This is on the list because of me more than anything else. And I know that I've shared with you stories and stuff about like Monty's tree and stuff, but this tree, when I first saw this tree, I was just blown away by this tree. But you can't find other people, or at least I haven't had too many other people say, hey, I think this is a cool tree too. Like Joe hates this tree. But I like it. And it's as opposed to the chamois ash, which grows rapidly, this one grows very slowly. So this one takes, let's see, I think I wrote it down here. In 10 years, only 10 to 15 feet tall. It's a very slow grower. Now, that has advantages when we're talking about size and adaptation to smaller lots and things like that. That means it's not going to be taken over your yard and tearing everything up. It's a very slow growing tree. Distinctive characteristics. You know, the leaves are very leathery, and they're kind of clustered out towards the end of stems. And there's a toothed margin along these leaves. They're really attractive. What I like about them the most is this. Do you guys see how when you look at them in the skyline, it almost looks like a flock of birds that are hovering around the trees? They have a really interesting skyline look to them. And they have very stout trunks. And they just think that, I think it's a really cool looking tree. Can't expect everybody to fall in love with it. One of the reasons why people are less inclined to really love the tree is that, you notice how those leaves are kind of swooping up from the central vein? What happens is that since we don't get a lot of rain from March through October, a lot of soot and, you know, airplane exhaust and all that stuff just lights in there, and so it gets kind of dirty inside. It kind of catches all of that stuff. But when it's right after it's rained, it really looks great. So anyway, here they are, skyline tree. Here's the leaf with all of the dirt that I talked about inside. You can see it's a compound leaf. These are the leaflets. 7. There's 7 on Fraxinus UDI as well, but they're much stiffer and more leathery. And they of course have that jagged edge, and they're kind of cupped upwards. Bark looks almost identical, but the trunks look more stout in comparison to the canopy. These are along Leeward Lane in Dover Shores. I feel bad for these trees because they're in 5-foot wide parkways, and so they're kind of oversized for that area. But they've definitely make a statement along this street. So if you drive along Leeward Lane in Dover Shores, you can see these as well. They're a narrow crotching tree, just like Fraxinus UDI. A narrow crotching tree is something we're usually concerned about in a natural situation on trees that aren't typically narrow crotching. But on a tree that's typically narrow crotching, knowing that, it creates less alarm bells. Because sometimes narrow crotching trees means that there are codominant stems, and those stems are pushing against each other, and there's going to be splitting. But that, since this is such a slow growing tree, we don't really see that happening in this tree. So here are how the leaves are, see how they're clustered out at the ends of the stems in a grouping, which creates that little puff that looks like, you know, birds could be flying around. But here's along Leeward Lane, and you can see these kind of stout trunk trees here. Slower growing, 10 to 15 feet in 10 years, more upright and denser when young. These are at branch ends like spiky tufts, creating a great silhouette against the sky, and have wavy toothed margins. Upward cupping leaves can collect dust between rains. Okay, Ligustrum japonicum. So when I was a student, landscaping was a little bit different. In the shrubs class, we had one list of shrubs, 25 shrubs that the teacher called the big greenies. And they were all these big green shrubs for creating barriers and privacy screens and background plantings and all of that. This was one of them that was on the shrubs list, but this is actually, we see this now more as a tree. So this is Ligustrum japonicum. And Ligustrum japonicum is from China, Korea, and Japan. 10 to 12 feet tall and about 8 feet wide. So these are just down the street from South Coast Village, behind the parking lot, behind what used to be a big Toys R Us. You guys remember? I don't know if you've been there, but so they're kind of the next shopping center inland from South Coast Village there. So so you can see that these trees have just now started to get all their little fruits on them, creating a kind of a weeping effect with their leaves. So here are their leaves. They're kind of almost camellia looking leaves, a very big, shiny leaf. And then they have these flowers and that result in these fruits that start green and then turn kind of a blackish color and then eventually fall off. So here are the leaves again. They're pretty lush looking. The trees that I'm showing you that I always go to get specimens from have never really been pruned. So they're a little wild. But here are the leaves, here are the fruits. And here's the underside of the leaves and the fruits as well. Here are the leaves against the bark. And here's a stem showing the leaves, and then here's the fruit again. Now, this is also a learning opportunity because Ligustrum japonicum was used to be a shrub, used mostly as a shrub. Now it's used mostly as a tree because our landscapes have gotten smaller, and now we're growing this actually to be a tree. But down below here, you see Ligustrum japonicum texanum. This is a hedge underneath. And this is the most commonly planted green hedge today, Ligustrum japonicum texanum. So I always stop and make a big fuss about this one was here first, and then they developed this one, and now this one is everywhere. It's kind of the green backdrop to the white iceberg roses and all of that stuff. So it's a, but this is much tighter growing. And this is, the leaves are spread much farther apart on this one. Small shrub to tree, 10 to 12 feet tall and 8 feet wide, with a dense, compact habit. Glossy, roundish oval leaves have a thick, slightly spongy feel, and are dark green on top and distinctly lighter underneath. Flowers are in clusters and creamy white, and sometimes considered foul smelling. Good for screening. Those berries can be a problem. So, you know, when they fall off, you know, they can be, you know, they don't really smash and spread around, but they create a bit of a nuisance. Good screening plant, good background plant, and good small scale tree. Okay. Hymenospermum flavum. This is called the sweet shade. This is in the Pittosporaceae family. But what I would tell you is that this one actually has leaves that are atypical of a Pittosporum. I always said that Pittosporum had a spatulate shaped leaf. It was narrower at the close to the stem than it was out at the end. This is not, doesn't follow that rule. So this is an upright tree, taller than it is wide. Can get 12 to 40 feet tall and 9 to 20 feet wide. Now this one, similarly to Tristania conferta, was often used a while back, was often used as that kind of between the two-story buildings, you know, that area where we needed something tall and slender that could provide the screening between the upstairs of one place next to the upstairs of another. The benefit of this one, however, it has one of the nicest smelling flowers that I have ever smelled. It's beautiful. And it's a lovely, delicate, but you know, really attractive scent. And if you walk by this tree when it's blooming, you'll linger because it smells great. These were on the apartments along Fairview, just across from College Park. And they've kind of almost reached their maximum 40 feet and were there for 50 years. I think most of these have been taken out since I took this picture about 3 or 4 years ago. This one's behind a place called Greenleaf. It's a place on 17th Street in Westminster. But anyway, I visited both of these. These weren't here, and this one was today. Great smelling tree. The flowers start out with white and then fade to a kind of a yellowish and then a golden yellow, and then they drop off. Here's one that we had planted in front of Watson Hall. I don't know if it's still there or not. I'm afraid that it might not be. But you can see it's kind of an open structure, so it's not a dense tree at all. But here's what I wanted you guys to see. And I just want you to know that I drove far and wide to look for this today. And that's that it has these seeds that are what I call like clamshells opening up. And then these seeds are arranged in little rows here. And I don't know if you've ever seen a giant clam, but it has like a kind of a filter or like a screen that it kind of pushes or sucks water through, but kind of looks like that. It looks like a gaping maw, like an opening mouth or something to me. And so the reason I make a big deal about this is that the flowers are only for a month or maybe 5 weeks, and these things hang on for a while. After the seeds drop out, that clamshell shape is still up there. So here they are. You can see they're, the outline of the backside, but here are the seeds all lined up inside, ready to just be tapped and then flutter to the ground. And then you can see the leaves come to a point. Instead of being rounded at the ends and wider, they come to a point. So here are those seed pods, which are distinctive. And here are the leaves that come to a point. And then once the seeds fall out, you still have that kind of open, shaped pod sitting there like that. And it'll stay like that for a year until it breaks off. So you can usually, when you say, God, it looks like it might be a sweet shade, there's no flowers. This is what we're looking for up in the tree. And they will stay on there for a year. So you should be able to find these. And that's your key. That's the thing you look for. So here are the ones that I think are no more, because when I was driving by today, I kept looking in between these apartment buildings and I didn't see them. So I don't know why. They were a perfect fit for that area. Here's a little one. This is in a little development called Back Bay Loop off of Santa Ana Avenue. And they have these trees, but you can see how they're very open. And
hey, Rick.
yes.
I'm sorry, but I just have to say that I also used to live there.
Oh, you did?
This is my second house that you've featured.
Oh, that's amazing. So this house back here, you lived there? Where'd you go?
I only lived there for like 2 years, but still.
Okay, but still. So then you probably saw this tree then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, here's my car. I've been pruning this lady that lives catty corner to this house. I've been pruning her trees for 25 years, something like that. So twice a year, like clockwork. Anyway, so here's the leaf. Comes to a point. Here it is again, a little blurrier with my fat thumb or scale. Okay, Australian native. Now, let me just say that there's a couple that are in South Coast Village that are in little teeny tiny cutout planters, like 3x3 or even smaller, some of them. And they're hanging on. They don't look very good. And I overheard one of my students, and it stuck in my head when we were walking away, saying, wow, that tree's neither sweet nor shady. And I thought that was kind of funny because it's supposed to be the sweet shade. So I thought that was a funny, it's definitely not a tree that you plant for shade.
Is sweet shade one word or two words?
I think it's one word. I think it's one word. Okay, Calodendron capense. This is from South Africa, the Cape chestnut, 40 feet tall and 25 to 40 feet wide. This again is over in South Coast Village. This is they have one of these flanking each of the entrances into that area. These trees are known for having just a riot of blooms when they bloom. And it's usually around this time of year. Remember, this is springtime in South Africa. So we see a lot happening in the fall around here. They've had a little trouble with these trees because there's heavy soil in this area. And they've had to kind of create some drainage to try to get these trees to hang on. They like the water, but not too much. They don't like to have wet feet. But you can see here a little example of the flowering, the blooming. They have these huge panicles, which are inflorescence of flowers that look like little tiger lilies. They're white and with a little bit of pink. The other thing that we always look for in this tree is the capsule, which has 5 segments. And when it starts to open up, it looks like a starfish, okay? Kind of bumpy on the outside, and it looks like a starfish. So whenever we go to this tree, I've got the students up there looking for the starfish. And we usually always find them. Or we find these that haven't opened yet. They're kind of a round, bumpy ball, but you can see the 5 segments on them. So Here's the starfish again. Here it is starting to open up. And this is the chestnut-like seed that's inside. It's shiny and black and got the same size as a chestnut, big seed. And so those are two distinctive things. The flowers, and I think I have more pictures of the flowers, but this starfish-like thing. The leaves are quite large. Here's the panicle, which is a branched inflorescence. And you can see all those little individual pinkish flowers on there. Here they are close up, and I said they look like little tiger lilies, and tiger lilies have spots on them, and so do these. And so that's why I use that as an analogy, but they're really attractive. Here's the leaf and it's pretty smooth bark. It's got a little crackly on the towards the base, but relatively smooth. This is a class, I don't know, 2015, but look at how this tree was blooming in 2015. There were some blooms on this year, but I didn't stop with my pole pruner because I would have probably been accosted if I had done that. We have one at school. Here it is again at another entrance into South Coast Village. You can see the little starfish hanging up right up here. From Eastern Africa, close to the coast, this beautiful flowering tree gets up to 90 feet tall in its native area, but 30 feet tall and wide in cultivation. Beautiful large panicles of pinkish white tiger lily-like spotted flowers. Seed capsule starts out like a bumpy ball and opens along 5 seams, looking like a starfish and revealing black chestnut-like seeds. Seeds eaten by monkeys and birds, and the seed oil is used in skincare products because of the natural fatty acids. Okay. Gajira parviflora. I don't know. I'm hoping I've got some pictures of the flowers, or at least some little flowers on my specimens that you can see. But parviflora means tiny flower. And that's what the unique characteristic is on this tree by the person that named it. Now, when you look at this tree from a distance, it almost has a weeping characteristic. You guys see that? But it doesn't weep at all. The branches or the leaves droop down, but the branches sweep up. But it still has kind of a weeping look to it. So here are the leaves hanging down, and here's the leaf next to the bark. Very pronounced vein on this leaf, by the way. It's a narrow leaf, and you can always feel the vein, the center vein on this tree, this leaf. It's a characteristic that I always kind of test out every time I pop a leaf off and look at it. Here's a close-up of the little tiny flowers. And so you can see the leaf, which is only about 1/2 inch wide for scale. So these flowers are probably maybe 1/4 inch across, and they're tiny. So branches sweep upward, but leaves drape down, giving the whole tree a weeping characteristic. This tree is trouble-free. No insects or diseases to speak of. I mean, look, when I got the close up here, you could probably see a little spider webbing in there, but it's really kind of problem-free. I imagine we'll probably see a lot more of this tree planted. 25 to 35 feet tall and 20 feet wide. So again, small to medium-sized tree, combining the grace of a willow and the toughness of a eucalyptus. This Australian native grows 25 to 35 feet tall and 20 feet wide. Narrow, drooping leaves are olive green and pleasantly aromatic and give the tree a weeping effect. With age, it produces loose clusters of tiny flowers in early spring and sometimes in early fall. We usually find them on there when we do our trip around. Trouble-free patio, street, or grove tree. Small scale, doesn't really get into any problems with insects or disease, can tolerate our environment that we have here. Okay, now this tree, the Western Cottonwood Populus fremontii, we had one in the Arboretum, and it got hit by the Polyphegus shot-hole borer, and we took it down, but its roots are suckering, so it's still letting us know that it remembers us by suckering from its roots, which is what Populus do in general. But it's on here because it's a tree that it goes all the way from California all the way to the Rocky Mountains. It's a Western native tree, and it's a good tree for environments that have to endure rugged conditions, drought. Although it's usually found close to some kind of a water source, these trees are just pretty rugged. They've got a kind of a chunky bark. All the Populus have a deltoid shaped leaf or a spade shaped leaf on them. They've got really pretty fall color. So if you drive up 395, you see a lot of these as you're heading all the way up, to Lee Vining, and as you drive all around the Western United States, you'll be seeing these trees. The seeds, when they open, have a fiber or a kind of a flossy material in there that comes out with the seeds, and that's why it's called a cottonwood. And it can actually be, when there's a lot of cottonwoods around and all the seeds are opening up and all of that, then it can be can cover whole areas and make it look like it's snowing. This is one off the 395 and at a little rest stop, and this is not my hand. I can tell this is my wife's cousin's hand, but she was taking a picture for scale. And here it is in a park, so they can handle. I mean, they're happy. If you were to plant this in a lawn, though, you'd get a lot of surface roots. So it would be better not to do that. They're pretty competitive with the surrounding area. So this is probably not your let's plant this in our backyard tree, but it is a California native, and it does have a role to play, and we should recognize some of the trees that are around us regularly. This is in the Owens Valley. These are just some pictures that my wife's cousin took. She was up there. Here's the cottony stuff, that comes out with the seeds all in here, and this blows all over the place. This is June and July. This happens when it's kind of warm outside. Native to California and the Rockies south to Mexico, has a more spreading habit than the Lombardy poplar, which we're about to see. 40 to 80 feet tall, 30 to 50 feet wide. Not a good residential tree, but good for scale next to tall buildings or in large open commercial building areas. They have some of these at South Coast Plaza, believe it or not, planted in a lawn at the backside of the concert hall. Leaves deltoid in shape, toothed, and quite difficult to distinguish from the Lombardy poplar. Turn lemony yellow in the fall with colder nights. Adapts to many soil watering conditions, but prefers regular water. Complaints about cottony seed fibers getting everywhere. So anyway, they can grow. Mostly would be a park setting and a place where they were getting watered, but you weren't trying to mow a lawn underneath them. Okay, so this one, and these are on our list because these are at South Coast Plaza, and they're trees that we should know. This is Populus italica nigra, the Lombardy poplar. This one has this is a European native, 40 to 100 feet tall and 15 to 30 feet wide. So this is, iconic in its shape. And most of the time when we think about this planted along driveways in a rural setting, you know, kind of lining a driveway up to a winery in Italy and something like that. So it's a, you know, it's a big tree. And we had some of these at OCC, and they have these planted in front of a building that's right across from the Performing Arts Center. So you can go there and see them. They're probably only about 30 or 40 feet tall now, but and they over prune them, but still. Here's a kind of the look that we would see them. This is what they look like when they're full size. There's also some right down the street from my house on Costa Mesa Street. And the guy that lived in the house a few years back, probably about 10 years ago, topped them all. Just topped them all down to about 12 feet. And then when he did that, suckers came up in the houses on both sides of the trees and the next houses down. So there were like suckers coming up through everybody's planters and lawns and everything when the guy topped the trees. So the trees were paying him back, I think. Anyway, again, deltoid shaped leaf. We have taken these two leaves and set them side by side year after year and been not able to distinguish the difference. So, and I've tried myself. And so what I would tell you is, if you guys are going to be tested on these, it would be more of a shape thing than it would be a leaf thing. I just think it's, you know, fair. So here they are growing out in a more of an open area, riparian area. They, as long as they have access to a little summer water. Here they are in a ditch. We see these around. This is on Red Hill. There's some planted. Now this, they've kind of gone past their task of creating scale. This is only what, a 2 or 3 story building, but if you had an 8-story building, this would be perfect, right? Because it would give it scale. Here they've kind of overdone it, but you get the idea. Here's a full-size tree, and then here's one with the fall color, and you can kind of get a sense for, you know, what they look like when they get to be full size. Male selection of European native is a beautiful columnar tree, 40 feet tall to 40 to 100 feet tall, 15 to 30 feet wide. Upward arching branches. The branches are sweeping upward. Bright green leaves turn golden yellow in the fall. Excellent along country driveways for scale, for tall buildings, and as a skyline decoration. Prone to heavy suckering if pruned severely. Okay, so this should Colruyteria paniculata and Colruyteria bipinnata. Let's start with Colruyteria paniculata. Both these trees are from Eastern Asia. And if you were to just look at the tree, it would be very, very difficult to tell them apart side by side. They both have a round-headed form. They're considered a small to medium-sized tree, 30 to 35 feet tall. One says it's 30 to 35 feet tall. That's paniculata, and bipinnata 20 to 40 feet tall. The one on your list that we see at South Coast Plaza is Colruyteria paniculata. Now, I'm not giving you 2 for 1 to give you confusion. I'm giving you 2 for 1 because you're going to be seeing them both around you all the time. Here's how you tell the difference. One of them is a pinnately compound leaf. In other words, it has a stem and leaflets that come off of it. The other one, bipinnata, is bipinnately compound leaf. Okay, so it branches twice. Other than that, almost impossible to tell them apart. I've tried over and over and over again to find other things. It seems like the pods in paniculata can be a little bit more brown and don't get quite as brilliant of a reddish color or tint to them. But I've been shown wrong when I've seen these in different places in arboretums and stuff. So this is one pinnately compound leaf. So this is Coleruteria paniculata, one pinnately compound leaf. So here's the leaf, and here are the leaflets. Okay. Here's the bloom, the blossom. It's kind of an open yellow flower inflorescence, quite open like a panicle. These yellow flowers yield these papery lantern-like fruits with the seeds tucked up inside. Here's, if you open up the papery lanterns, you see these little black seeds inside. There you can see the kind of the general shape of the tree.
Is this what we're seeing right now? All those rosy, papery pod type things?
Yes. Here's the bark. Very similar. You can't tell them apart with a bark. So this is Coleruteria bipinnata. The biggest difference is the leaf. Bipinnata means twice divided, and the leaves are largely bipinnately compound leaves. We see more of these around. The reason we have paniculata on the list is because they're at South Coast Plaza, all the way down one of the streets, and so it's a great example to show you. But we're seeing more bipinnatas around. Paper lantern-like seed pods are known to have more of a rosy pinkish color, but not consistently. It has to do with how happy the tree is. It's inconsistent and not as reliable to look at the color of the papery pods or the shape of the tree. This is Coleruteria bipinnata, considered small to medium-sized tree. So this is one leaf, okay? So this is what you'll see. So if you're looking at one of these trees, go up there and snap off a leaf. And if it's got leaflets that are going along the stem like this, then it's paniculata. If it's twice divided like this one, this is all one leaf here. And it's quite open, so it'll reveal itself. So Coleruteria bipinnata, here's the one leaf. So here they are next to each other. Coleruteria paniculata, Coleruteria bipinnata. Obviously, this is a much larger leaf. This leaf can get quite serrated at the edge, though. I think there's a previous picture that shows it being really serrated. This one is more tight at the edge without the toothed margins. So I would, there are distinctive characteristics. Those paper lanterns, the round shape, but I would always pop off a leaf and then you'll know which one of the two you're seeing. This is bipinnata. So it's in flower. Again. So this is the first one. And so they're both the same, which we've showing you both. I don't mean to confuse you at all. All I want to tell you is that they are extremely similar in size, form, shape. The biggest difference is the way the leaf is divided. So Coleruteria paniculata, Eastern Asia, open branching trees, 20 to 35 feet tall, 20 to 40 feet wide, cast dappled shadow below so you can plant underneath them. Known for large sprays of golden yellow flowers in the late summer, they're followed by rose to buff colored paper lantern-like seed pods. Leaves are 15 inches long and have 7 to 15 oval toothed leaflets. Tree takes cold heat, drought, wind, and air pollution. So probably pretty good for our area. Distinguished from other species by less brilliant and typically more buff colored and sometimes pointier seed pod. but I have walked up to these trees with a whole class and made the mistake of thinking what I thought it was and then snapped off a leaf and I was wrong. And so you always just want to look at it real closely and distinguish whether it's twice divided or once divided. This is Coleruteria bipinnata, 20 to 40 feet tall, slightly less wide, eventually kind of flat topped. Leaves are 1 to 2 feet long, twice divided. Each leaflet has 7 to 12 of its own oval leaflets, briefly turning yellow before dropping. Blooms when very young and close spray of yellow flowers, papery lantern-like capsules in late summer, take on a rosy or salmon blush and are sometimes less pointed and more round at the tips. Deep, non-invasive leaves and open growth make this a good tree for underplanting. So both species are good for underplanting. Okay. Rus lancea. So we've skipped over because we've already had Earthrina christogalli. Rus lancea, African sumac, is from Africa. When we look at this leaf, it's a compound leaf. And what I always try to look for is that the leaflets on the leaf itself are on different planes. So these two leaves are higher than this leaf here. So if you were to hold it straight, looking at it straight on, the two outer ones are a little bit higher. They have these kind of creamy yellow flowers that make these fruits that are kind of like peppercorns. They can be messy if if they're in an area where there's lots of traffic. But I haven't seen them in that environment, so I just know that they could be messy. Here are the little flowers. You can almost not even see them. They're so delicate when they come. And then these fruits are the ones that come afterwards, and they hang on for a while. They go from being kind of a greenish yellow color to a kind of this dirty papery look. These are the ones we used to have. We don't have these anymore. There's a big building there right now, but the tree care class pruned them every year for many years. These are drought tolerant, by the way. 25 to 30 feet tall and 20 to 35 feet wide, open spreading habit with graceful weeping outer branchlets. Dark green leaves are divided into 3 willow-like 4 to 5 inch leaflets. Clusters of pea-sized yellow or red fruit can be messy on sidewalks or driveways, look like peppercorns when persisting on the tree. It takes desert heat, so it can handle some pretty adverse conditions. Okay. All right, so any questions for me so far?
I do on number 115 on Populus. On the list, you have it as Populus italica nigra, and then on the PowerPoint, you had Populus nigra species italica.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering.
Thanks for for pointing that out. I'll have
I
to
just
go
don't
back.
want to write the wrong one down.
Yeah, so always go by the list. So if ever there's any confusion, go by the list. If I make a mistake on the list, and I make mistakes, I try not to, since I'm holding you to such high standards. But if I make a mistake and it's spelled improperly on the list, then if you spell it the way it was on the list, I won't mark you off for that.
But when I look it up on Google, it looks like it's the way on PowerPoint. Populus nigra italica.
Okay, let me hang on a second. It's funny because I just looked this up before the class got into the class. Populus. So I'm looking at the Sunset Western Garden book because I just happen to have it out. Populus nigra italica.
On the list, you have it the other way around.
I do.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll make sure it's right. Okay. So what I would do is, yeah, it should be the other way around, you guys. So let's do this right now. It's Populus nigra italica.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for me? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. We'll see you back here. Okay, well, we've lost a few. Hopefully they'll be back. What I wanted to show you here was we're on number 105, Earthrhina humiana. What I wanted to show you here was this is I'm just gonna have to run this by you. So here's where the branch tip was. Then this here is one flower at the end of the branch. So this is probably about, I'd say from where it originated, it's probably about, here's another one over here doing the same thing, very long deal. So this stem that has had a few leaves on it, but is holding the flower way above, probably about 2.5 feet long. So here's this one that has a flower intact. And then you can see, I think I've got a leaf pulled off so you can get a good sense for what the leaf looks like. It's a little shinier. We're not seeing any spurs on this leaf. There's a little bit of a bumpiness here, but there's no real distinctive spur there. Okay. So this flower is long and spread out, and it's held above the outer crown of the tree. The leaves are spade shaped, but come to a little bit more of a point. There's several leaves here, but they're all kind of the same. Let's see if I can show you one that looks a little bit better. Some of these have been through hard times, it seems. Ouch. Okay. Here's another one. You can see that they do come to a little bit more of a point here. Flip them over. So definitely have more of a sheen on these leaves than Earthrhina coralloides. Okay. Any questions about the natal coral tree? You guys have any questions about this one that we might have missed on the PowerPoint? Or so there's I think I've got 2 or 3 flowers on this one. All right. 5 flowers. Okay, so number 106, Gladitia triacanthos sunburst. I mean, there's one leaf over here that looks like it's bursting a little bit. But this is one that was in the lawn. And if I were to go across the sidewalk to the ones that were in the planter, they're looking much more at the end of their cycle. And so they're much more yellow and dropping off and everything. So I got the one that looked a little lusher. But compound leaf here. The leaflets are kind of an oval to, they don't really come to a really sharp point, but they do come to a point. And here we have the Gladitsia flattened, like a flattened snake pod. With the seeds, you can see the impressions of the seeds inside here. So remember, this is from Central and Eastern North America, and would have a little bit more of a color display if we had some colder nights. Okay. Okay, so this is Magnolia grandiflora. Here's the top of the leaf, it's very shiny. And then we've got a little bit of a fuzzy underside of the leaf. We can also see that after the flower yields these cone-like structures that are called scars, S-C-A-R, and you can still see a few sticky little seeds attached to those scars. And also you see a younger scar here that hasn't opened up yet. So they usually you see them in different levels of development. So remember, this is one of the older of the angiosperm families. And they think that there's a lot of connection between the pine cones of the conifers and the scars that these flowering trees make. There's another plant that we had, Michelia, I think it was on last week's list, it's in the same family, as the same kind of a long structure on it. Okay. I happen to know that this Magnolia grandiflora, because I know where Joe got this one. I know that this is a variety. So, this variety is called Samuel Summers. And Samuel Summers is known to have a little bit of a wider leaf on it. And it has a real attractive form. But there are many, many varieties of magnolias. The dwarf varieties are the ones that I usually pay the most attention to, because this is a good sized tree to fit into, your average backyard. So the dwarf ones seem to be a little more appropriate. Okay. Any questions about Magnolia grandiflora? Okay, Melaleuca ericifolia, the Heath Melaleuca. I have a little piece of the papery bark here. And it is kind of papery and shreddy. You can also see that, like many Melaleucas and callistemons, you can see remnants of the blooms from before, little tiny capsules hugging the stems in here. So after it blooms, it continues growing. Very small, narrow leaves, maybe up to an inch long, usually a little shorter than that. And very wispy. Some of them have, when they take on kind of almost a bronzy color, the whole canopy. When the growth is older, you know, after the new growth has been there for a while, it kind of gets a little darker. But very cool plant. I've had a hard time finding these in cultivation. So I'm not sure quite why that is. Let's see if I pull off a little bit of one of the little seed capsules there. It's pretty darn small. Okay. Okay, so we're always looking for small scale trees in our yards here. So this is a good one. All right. Okay, so this is Fraxinus UDI Tomlinson. Remember, this one takes 10 to 15 10 years to get 10 to 15 feet tall. So it's a slow grower. And here you can see, here's one leaf, 2, 4, 6, 7 leaflets, just like Fraxinus UDI, except they're much more leathery. They're kind of cupped upwards. And they're a little bit toothed at the edges of the margins of the leaves, undulating and toothed. Okay, I think they're pretty cool. And here's the underside of the leaf. Okay. Any questions about this one? Okay, the Ligustrum japonicum, the Japanese privet. We can see the fruits. These are going to go from this kind of a light green to almost a black color with time. And you can see that these are very attractive, dark green, very dark green leaves on the top, and then a much lighter color on the underside of the leaf. Almost spongy in their texture when you feel them. So this is what used to be exclusively planted as a shrub or a screen, and now has found its way to being a tree more often and sold as a tree more often. Okay. Okay. Any questions, you guys? All right.
Rick,
Yes.
what do you think led it to being used more as a tree? Just it does better as a tree, or people just realized how pretty it looks as a tree?
I think it's the size. I think that what's happened is that we used to have this as a shrub, a tall background shrub. And now our yards have scaled down and our houses have gotten larger on this on smaller lots. And so these big plants are just kind of, there's no real use for them. But then since they do get as tall as they do get, then they're starting to train them as trees, because small scale trees are better for our small lots than a huge tree. So I think it's just the practicality of Southern California high density houses and how our lots have gotten so small compared to our house size.
That makes a lot of sense.
Do they require a lot of water? Because they look, so lush. I could see something like this do a year well in our neighborhood because we have all our historic homes, but
Yeah.
it requires a lot of water, maybe not.
It does. I think it couldn't go all summer without water, but once it's established, an infrequent deep watering through the summer, maybe every couple of weeks, be just fine for this one. So I think we tend to think of we water too frequently and not deep enough in most of our situations. So I think that they don't need it. They don't suffer once they're established. They do have to be baby when they're young, just like anything does. But no, I don't think so. The reason I say that is that I see these in old homes that are probably built in like the 40s, and I'm sure they were planted as shrubs initially, but then they were kind of left alone, and now they're trees, and there's no irrigation. In other words, they're in that kind of setting where somebody takes out a hose with a sprinkler once in a while, but there's no formal irrigation in these houses. They're still just what was ever there before, like old hydrangeas and stuff that has just kind of grown up. So I guess that's where I would get my clues from, is that these are homes that I see them in that don't have regular irrigation coming on. It's just whenever somebody feels generous and comes out with a hose end sprinkler. Okay, so this is get these berries out of there. I have an Osperum flavum. This is the sweet shade, Pittosporaceae family. So even though they do get a little wider at the ends, they come to a point. Instead of it being rounded, they come to a point. Now these leaves are a little chlorotic. The tree that I pulled them off of was not at its best, but they can have a nice lush look to them. Remember, they're open in form. I also make sure you see these little clamshell seed pods. Right. And I was just very carefully trying to bring this one home with the seeds still intact. The seeds are just aching to jump off of that pod. So, but I wanted you to see what they look like with the seed pod still intact. It's a characteristic that is kind of your fail safe. Identification thing. Okay, it's those clamshell pods. Okay. All right, so this one has very aromatic flowers. They start out yellow, they fade to darker and darker golden yellow. Tall columnar tree in between two-story buildings. Probably not as rugged as the Tristania. That's why Tristania is kind of taken over in that role, but this one was used a lot. I planted it a lot, and I just don't see them around as much, and it's probably because they can look a little spindly as they're establishing. Any questions about this one? Okay. Okay, so this is Calodendron capense. This is the Cape chestnut, and this is the one that we have in the arboretum. And I can tell it's not. I mean, we don't have a big panicle to show you. We just have the remnants and one or two little flowers hanging on here. But we do have the big green shiny leaves. And the underside of the leaves, which is still pretty dark green on the underside with pronounced veins. These are quite pronounced on the underside of the leaves. So you always see the vein pattern on these leaves. This is probably a typical size. This one I'm holding here, this is about 4 inches long. They can get 4 to 6 inches long. And then you can see the fruit here, that if we look at it head on, we can see that it has 5 sections. Those will open up and then reveal the dark, shiny black seeds inside. So there's actually, I think, 5 seeds inside this altogether. Okay. Looks kind of like a starfish when it opens up. So this one needs to have water. It needs to have regular water, but it grows much smaller in a cultivated surrounding than it does in its native habitat. So usually about 30, 35 feet tall, 25 to 40 feet wide. Okay, so there's the Cape chestnut. Make sure you jump in with questions if you guys have them, okay? These are kind of curled up. I think it's, you know, they weren't that way a couple of hours ago, but they are now.
Rick, is this a new family that we haven't come across yet?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The family, the Rutaceae?
Rutaceae, yes.
Yeah, is there something about it that these two have in common that?
Oh, in the Rutaceae family? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Okay.
You know, what's kind of interesting is that Calodendron capense has such a large flower, and Geygira parviflora has such a tiny flower. So it's hard to draw any similarities. When I first started teaching plant ID, I got a book called it was a book about families and all about the families, thinking that I was going to develop some new insights that I could share with my students regularly. And I quickly learned that some of the things that they are attributing to families are so scientifically specific that if you try to point that out, it's like, and not only that, but I didn't even understand what some of the things that they were grouping these plants together with. So it didn't prove to be as useful as I thought it would. Okay, so here, fortunately, we have the beginnings of little flowers. You can see them on here. And we can also see these willow-like leaves here. Remember, I don't know if you can tell by this leaf I've got here that I'm kind of putting my fingers on, but the vein on that leaf is quite pronounced. You can see it right here. And I bring that up because tactile things are things that we're not really getting exposed to much. You're going to see it on that when I zoom in a little bit. And these tactile things where you feel things are really good for identification. And so that's why I make a big fuss about it. Because you say, oh, this looks like this. And then if it has that pronounced vein, then you can feel a little better that you were closer to being right in your observations anyway. So pronounced vein in the leaf, very tiny little flowers, very tiny. So these haven't opened up yet. And when they do, they're going to be maybe 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch across, little tiny things. Leaves hang down from the branches, but the branches are sweeping up at the same time. Pretty trouble-free. No diseases or insect that really likes these things in particular. Whereas if you were to look at a similar thing like Podocarpus, which has a leaf that's quite similar, lots of stuff gets in those leaves. And so this one is, looks the same, but really nothing gets in there. Okay.
Is there a scent to this one?
It says that there's a scent,
Or the capense?
It says that there's a scent on the leaves. And we go through this whole thing every year, the class, because it says that the leaves are scented. and I smell the leaves every year, and everybody smells the leaves, and we kind of just stare at each other blankly. So there's really no, there's no, it's not about, not, it's nothing like a, it just smells like a leaf, you know, which I don't know, you know, I would, maybe it's maybe it's me, but I haven't had anybody else illuminate it any better.
I was wondering more about the flowers and also with the Calodendron capense, because in the Rutaceae family, I mean, I'm just looking online and it says the Rutaceae family, commonly known as rue or citrus family of flowering plants, usually placed blah, blah, blah. But generally have flowers that divide into 4 or 5 parts, usually with strong scents.
Yeah. Haven't noticed any scents on these flowers.
What about with the Calodendron capense?
We haven't, you know, we expected a lot more. You can detect a little bit, but it's nothing like a citrus flower, which is very pungent. You can smell a slight scent in the Cape chestnut, but it's not something that we don't. I don't know. It's not that great, I guess. So we always try whenever we can as a class to prove them right or wrong, and there just hasn't been anything definitive. But you're right about that, because we have a tree in the horticulture department that we didn't know what it was, but it looked like it was in the Rutaceae family, and it has extremely aromatic flowers on it. So there are some in the Rutaceae family that do have very aromatic flowers, but I don't know. So that's what caused them to be in that family. So. Okay, so I'm gonna put one of our 2 populates up here. This one is Populus nigra italica. Now remember, we needed to make that change on our lists. Okay. And you can see this is a deltoid shaped leaf, top and bottom. These leaves are getting to the point where they're going to be dropping off within the next month or so. And this particular tree, as you know, is the tall columnar tree that gets 40 to 100 feet tall. Now, the Populus fremontii, which is the Western cottonwood, has leaves that look almost identical. We went through this, and we always go through it every year, because I'm always trying to have some observation that a student would make that I can't see or detect, and we haven't been able to do it yet on this one. So I'm sure that if you talk to a serious hardcore botanist, they would probably be able to give you some insights that I can't. But I think it's more important for us to recognize visual cues and understand the roles that these would play in the landscape and their culture and all that, if there's nothing that's going to be definitive in the identification. Okay. But they all have the little the buds here that are going to be yielding the flowers. This is where these will drop off, and these buds will continue on next year. So we always see that. But other than that, the 2 look very, very similar. Okay. Okay, so this is all one leaf. Okay, this is where it snaps off. And I'm just going to kind of shuffle it along here. So you remember that these leaves can get 1 to 2 feet long. And I would say that this is pretty close to 2 feet long. So which one of the two Coleruterias is this, would you say?
Chinese flame?
Yes, Chinese flame tree. Yeah, I was having to look up the common names.
Bipinnata.
Yeah, bipinnata, yes. So yes, that's what it is. And so you see how big this leaf is. Now I have another one that's off a tree that's probably only about 3 or 4 years old. But it's still 18 inches long. So I think I've got this thing zoomed out all as far as it'll go. So this is a younger tree. And so the leaf is still huge. So this is Coleruteria bipinnata. And this is the only one I have a specimen for. I'm kicking myself. I knew there were a bunch of Coleruterias up and down Highland Drive, and I made a mad dash to try to find a paniculata for you, and they all were bipinnatas. And so finally I had to come home because class was starting. So I tried, and they're at South Coast Plaza. I'm trying to think which street it is. It's the first street that when you come over the top of the 405 and you drop down and can turn right. But they're lining on both sides of the street there. So this is bipinnata, paniculata. So if ever you're given this on a test or a quiz or anything like that, you'll always have access to the leaf and some other cue that gives you an idea. I would never expect you guys to ID this strictly just from the leaf, because there are differences within the individuals. And for example, Coleruteria paniculata, some of them have pretty jagged edges along the leaves, and some of them are pretty smooth along the leaf. And so what I would want you guys to know is that what the general tree looks like, it's the one with the papery lanterns and the one that has the yellow open panicles of flowers. And the lanterns hang on for a long time with the seed pods, which are like little papery lanterns, and that one of them is compound, bipinnately compounded, divided twice, and the other one's divided once. So you'll always have access to that information. Okay. Erythrina christogalli. This is the cockspur coral. We don't have flowers for the first time since I've taught this class to look at. And I think it's because we're in a drought. I'm not sure. I think it's they're going ahead and hardening off. But anyway, you can see this compound leaf, and you can see that it's not spade shaped. The leaflets are not spade shaped. They're they come to a point. They're lanceolate. And I was just noticing there's a little bit of a nub here on this leaf. It kind of seems like it wants to be a spur. It's just right here. It feels rough when you feel along this leaf, and it's right there. So, and then you can see another one right there. But it's not like coralloides. It's just like, you know, with these daggers coming out. So, but I was able to, and this is something we don't usually see on the tree, unless we start really looking hard. And most of the time it's on the ground, and most of the time they're broken open or they're already past their prime. But these are seed pods that are just starting to eject their seeds. You can see that they're bright red inside, and you can see that they're very interesting in their shape, where they have the bulges right where the seed is, and then it slims down to a really small section in between the lumps that are holding the parts that are holding the seed itself. So it's a really unique looking seed pod. Okay. And of course, the flower is unique as well. And what do you guys remember about the bark of this tree as opposed to the other earth rhinas? Bueller.
Can you repeat that?
What do you remember about the bark of this tree that's different than the other coral trees we've seen?
It was
It
really
stuck
rough.
up a lot and it was really rough.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm just glad to know you're out there. I'm glad to know you're out there. So anyway, this is a good one. It's a small scale tree. It has persistent flower stalks that have to be kind of taken out so that the tree looks a little cleaner and it keeps blooming. Okay, so this is Rus lancia. This is the African sumac. Lancia, I'm sure, is describing the leaves. They're like a lance. But remember, they're compound leaves. They have 3 leaflets. And you see how I'm rocking this one back and forth. The 2 that are on the outside are on a higher plane than the one that's in the middle. And sometimes they have kind of interesting shapes, you know. The one in center is usually always longer, but sometimes these are almost kind of curved on the outside, like a triton, you know, that Poseidon would have, or that you'd go spearfishing with. So it's an interesting leaf. And of course, up here you can see the fruits. They're like little peppercorns. You can see those. The flowers come really quickly and go away, but the peppercorns persist on there. So this is an African native, 20 to 30 feet tall, and can handle you know, some pretty droughty conditions. Kind of a dense foliage tree. Okay, so unique shaped leaf. So that's most of them. We didn't get to see the 2 Coleroterias next to each other, and we didn't get to see the 2 poplars next to each other. But we got to see most of them. Okay, so everybody turn your cameras on if you can. I know we probably all don't feel like it, and Some of us some of us are probably asleep at the wheel. There we are. All right. So I had a question on my on the chat about the field trips. And it was, can we bring somebody with us on the field trips? And I think it was Iris that asked that question. Iris, are you there? I can see your little square. But the answer to the question is, and Iris, if she's not there, she's not going to get the answer. But yes, you can bring somebody if you want. Especially like to the Huntington, you can actually, you know, you can send them off to do something while we're doing our walkabout. Then you can meet up with them later and have some more time at the Huntington. So that would be a good thing. So yes, you can. The only rule is don't bring somebody that's going to distract you. That's important. Okay. So, you know, sometimes when we bring our kids, I've had lots of kids on my field trips and they've been great, but you know, I'm pretty kid friendly, but it's, you know what distracts you and what doesn't. And so I'm leaving it up to you. Okay. So yeah, it should be a fun thing. So I'm going to leave that one up to you. Now, usually what we say is on the first 2 field trips, no. The last 2, since we were driving quite a distance, since it's taking a bigger chunk of the day, we say, yes, it's fine. So plan on that. Anybody else have questions for me?
I have a question.
Yeah.
For the drive-by trees, are we allowed to use any of the trees that we see when we're on our field trip as part of that too? Or is it just like strictly the tree like list?
Oh, so like on our field trips, you guys are all catching up on your drive-by trees. Here's a picture of me by the tree thing.
Yeah.
You know, I again, you know, I think there's that would be okay as long as it didn't get to be too crazy. You know what I mean? Because it could, if you guys are starting to get into that mode, then that would be driving you more. So for instance, let me just give you an example. In Claremont, when we've walked down through probably about 5 or 6 campuses. Okay. And then we get to a street called College Avenue, and we just walk all the way up College Avenue to Foothill, and it's probably about 8 or 9 blocks. Okay. And I tell the students, I say, you're going to be seeing 50% of the trees on your trees list in these 9 or 10 blocks. Okay. And this is what happens. You know, some of you are like, you know what, I've seen enough, I've heard enough from this guy. And so it becomes more of a relaxed kind of a social thing. And those people kind of hang back. But then there's always a few people that want to hear or be challenged by me saying, what's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? And that's what I do. And I don't expect you all to be right there and, you know, riveted to my everything I say once we're kind of heading back. The opportunities are there for you guys to learn some stuff, and since we haven't been on these field trips, we haven't walked around campus, we haven't really seen trees in person together. It'll be a new environment for us. So to a long-winded answer, Alex, is that I want you to just, if you have 1 or 2 that you want to do, great, but don't make it about that if you can avoid it, you know?
Okay.
1 or 2 is fine, yeah. Like if you happen to be there and you're burning some time, take a picture, get somebody to take a picture of you. That's no problem. Let's see what else.
Sorry, I had another question about the trees drive-by thing. Because I was driving around the other day taking photos, but I was kind of like causing traffic, so I didn't take like a selfie, and I just took a picture of the tree.
Mm-hmm.
But is that okay too, or
no? You
Okay.
got to get out, yeah. So the whole reason for this, and because a lot of you guys have probably seen 10 of this and 20 of that since we've been introduced to the trees, right? The whole reason for the drive-by is not to create more busy work for you guys, but to try to force you to get really close to that tree. And so,
Oh, well, I got out and I took a picture of the tree. Like I was walking around and
Right,
stuff, but I just
right.
didn't take a picture of my face in front of it.
Yeah.
But it's my own photo. I don't know if that's okay or not.
It's okay, but we want your face in there.
Okay.
And so take one of the tree and then take one with your face. And if the one, we can see it's the same tree in both pictures. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be like all staged and perfect, you know, but take a good one of the tree and one with you with your face in front of the tree. If you're by yourself, I know there's going to be limits to what you can do. So I'm pretty flexible, but try to get yourself in front of that tree because it's showing me that you were there and there's the tree and there's you. So that's what all of that's about. So any other questions, you guys?
Was the field trip, it's on the 19th or the 20th?
It's on Saturday, the 20th.
Okay, okay. Just making sure.
And then
Thank you.
and then it's on the on December 4th.
Okay.
Okay. So when we get closer, I'm going to give you, you know, exactly where we meet and exactly how do you get there and all of that stuff. So we'll all be kind of dialed into that. I think it'll be good. Last year, you know, I mean, we got through this without seeing each other at all, but I think that that this might be, this would be at least another stab at capturing a little bit of what the classes is supposed to be like, you know. And for instance, like when I'm showing you guys those specimens and stuff, you know, I'm typically in a classroom with you and I know if you're starting to nod off or not. And I change everything I do based on what I'm seeing out there in the crowd, right? But when I'm just sitting up here, sometimes I'm like, you know, so it's weird. This is weird. All right. So anyway.
So we don't have a class next week, right?
Yes, next week is Veterans Day. So we don't have a class next week. We have a class on the 18th. And then we have a field trip on the 20th. Okay. So so what we'll do is we'll probably go over the list. We'll go over the list that's going to Claremont, and then we'll go out and see the trees in Claremont on the 2 days later. Okay. So the next time I see you guys, it'll be, you know, the week of our field trip. All right. Any other questions for me while we're all together? All right. So thank you for hanging here for the whole time, and make sure you made that one correction on the Lombardy poplar, and I will change the list as well so that reflects that. Okay. All right, you guys. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Bye.